The Pasture Podcast, Episode 3. The Pasture-Raised Podcast, Episode 3. The Pasture-Raised Podcast, Episode 3.
Hello and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our first interview last week with Dave Shields. I appreciate all the kind feedback I've received on it, and I just want to welcome you to subscribe and leave a review. Let other folks know about it if you found it to be valuable. Before we get into today's episode, let me just talk a little bit about what you might be able to expect from this podcast going forward. My plan is to release an episode towards the beginning of the week, each week, through the remainder of winter. And as we push into spring 2020, that frequency will likely go to every other week or so. As you've gathered, I'll be doing mostly interview-style shows with farmers about the farm businesses folks are running. But I do have a few discussions coming up that will be a little more topically focused as well. This week, we've got a great interview for you with Jordan Green of J&L Green Farm and the Farm Builder channel on YouTube. With his wife Laura, Jordan raises and sells weaned pigs, pork, beef, chicken, and turkey in Edinburgh, Virginia. Jordan is a really smart fellow, as you'll see in a minute. He's applying radically independent critical thinking and finding opportunities and exploiting them at every turn, while understanding and managing his risk. There's probably no evidence of this better than the fact that the farm business he's built is unique and robust. One big thing that struck me is how Jordan is so capable of taking his high-level thinking, his experience, and his well-earned perspective and presenting it at a conceptual level in order to, in a sense, further value add his knowledge and help the rest of us see more clearly how we can apply these business and farming principles in our own contexts. I suppose experience and knowledge with the ability to communicate them effectively and applicably in a motivating way is the essence of what a good teacher is. And that's exactly what you have here. For those of us who got into farming with more idealism than business principles swirling around in our brains, teachers like this offer a necessary counterbalance and are examples of the ways we'll need to think and farm if we're going to be in this for the long haul. Here's my interview with Jordan. Enjoy.
What are you planning on raising in 2020?
Well, there's a couple operations we have that are, year round, and that's the pig operation that we have and beef. So those are going on, day in, day out, 365. Poultry is the only seasonal type of operation we have, and so that adjusts a little bit from year to year depending on what our inventory is. So, we just had one of our planning meetings last week, and we're bumping those numbers up a little bit. So, what's on the queue for us this year is turkeys, chickens, and then pigs and cows.
Do you have a number you think of how many you might finish of each of those?
With chickens, I think we're going to start 4,000 is what we're planning for. And then turkeys, we'll start about 500. And, typically you have 5 to 10% mortality on those. So, just do the math on that. And that's about how many birds we'll put in the freezer.
Great. And then you all are fair to finish on your hogs?
How many we put in our own freezer fluctuates quite a bit because we are primarily a farrowing operation and selling piglets to other farms. So there's been times that we've had to raise out more pigs than we really needed, but we just put a bunch in inventory and then adjusted, less over the next 6 months to let the inventory balance back out. And then with retiring sows, that's basically the equivalent of 3 feeder pigs. This year we're looking to put about 250 equivalents in our own freezer, but we have a pipeline in place that if someone were to roll in tomorrow, as a customer and say, hey, we could move 500 a year for you, we could be doing that within 6 months.
That's great. You just upgrade a few gilts into sows or bring on more gilts, or what?
I would just tell a few of our customers, hey guys, you're getting less and just retain more. I mean, we have 165 sows right now, and we're probably going to be bumping up on 200 this year. And, that's a lot of piglets. We're birthing anywhere from 150 to 200 a month right now. Wow. And so, it would not be too long for there to be a lot of pigs running around here if that's what we wanted to do. So a lot of our feeder groups that we put together are kind of these misfits that isn't really a marketable piglet to another farm. Maybe it's a little bit slow grower, has a limp or, had an injury or something as a piglet. So our own feeder groups that we raise are usually the kind of this motley crew of different sized ones. And maybe one has a hernia and, they're kind of about the bottom 5% of the piglets we produce.
Wow.
And then we'll have our replacement gilt groups, which are, the really nice looking ones. And right. So people who come and tour the farm kind of get the full spectrum of these are really nice looking pigs. And these ones are, they're special.
Right. Yeah. Right. They got to go somewhere, I guess. And value.
But that's kind of the beauty of a direct to retail model is we have a place for those outliers, the animal that would not work well or that we would not want to sell to another farm. He might take another couple months to grow out or, look, like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. We can grow that out and we can put him in the sausage and he tastes just fine.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Just kind of to recap, you're like 80-90% of the piglets that are born on your farm, you're shipping them out to folks who are buying in your piglets. Is that right?
I don't know of the percentage offhand, but it is a significant amount of the piglets we're birthing are leaving here to go out to other farms.
With the pigs, raising that many hogs out in a temperate climate, what are some of your strategies for keeping the soil from all going down the Shenandoah River?
Right. Well, especially during the winter is the biggest challenge for us. We are here in the northern part of Virginia, and it's been something that we've had a lot of discussions about over the last couple of years, because when we started our farm in 2009, our first 3, 4, 5 winters it froze up in November. We had frozen ground all the way through the winter. It snowed, 20 to 60 inches of snow, and then it warmed up in March and we rolled into spring. The last 3 winters that we've had have been progressively getting warmer and warmer to where the ground is barely frozen. We actually turned our water system, our above ground water system, we turned it back on like 2 days after New Year's this year because it was 45, 60 degrees during the day and maybe 30 at night. And so right now, I'm looking out at one of our pastures and it is dark green and already starting to grow, and here we are the first week of February. So there's been some significant changes to our local winter weather conditions that we've had to make adjustments for on our production because we can't count on that frozen ground anymore. A pig is not that destructive to frozen ground because he can't get his nose in there and do much, and it's cold, so he'll just kind of hang out in bed and not cause too much destruction. But this moist, wet soil in the winter is a prime candidate for the pigs to really dig into and cause some disturbance. So things that we're doing to mitigate that is keeping pigs on the flatter areas of the farm if at all possible. We're doing a lot of bedding in their nesting areas to encourage them to kind of hang out in those spots and not dig holes elsewhere. And then one of our biggest moves that we made this year that also ties in with our increased production and the scale we're starting to get to is we've started leasing a retired poultry farm a few miles down the road, and we converted one of the poultry houses into an indoor farrowing facility. And so we are doing all of our winter farrowing indoors now, and all of our weaning activities for the winter have moved inside as well. And so we've got, right now, 200 plus weaner/feeder pigs in this facility. We got 25 sows in there that are farrowing right now, and all of them are on deep bedding, just building up the bedding pack that we can turn into compost in the spring once we move the animals back out.
That's great. What are you using for bedding in those barns or anywhere else you got hogs?
It's a combination of hay and wood chips, really depending on what we have. We go around to hay producers in the area during the summer and say, hey, do you have any bales left over from last year that you want to get rid of, or do you have any hay that got rained on and it's unsuitable for herbivores? And we're able to pick up several hundred junk round bales a year for 10, $15 a bale. And so we use a lot of that for bedding. But then we usually have some kind of fence clearing project going on where we can also get a bunch of chips. So, this morning we were actually down in the hog mahal bedding our weaning pens. And so, the nice thing about a poultry house is it's a 70-foot wide building and it's 300 feet long, and it has doors on either end. So we created an alley from end to end that we can actually just drive through the entire length of the house. Oh. And so we can just bring the truck and, dump trailer, pull it right into the house and just shovel the chips off into the pens on either side. And, in a morning we can bed the whole place if we need to.
Great. Do you have your own chipper?
I don't, but I have a connection. My brother-in-law has a big Vermeer chipper that they use for all of their wood chips, but they're not using it all the time. So he's more than happy to rent it out to me and a couple other guys just to help cover the costs of maintaining the machine. So we've got it for a few weeks here, and we're running a bunch of fence line trees through it, and make a pile of chips that'll last us a year.
When it comes to your pigs, I was watching a video of yours last week, and I noticed, or maybe it was one on your cattle grazing and another one on your chickens, and it seemed like you're running both of those animals over ground that the pigs had been on. I talked to a lot of folks who would shriek at the idea of having their pigs on any ground that they would ever expect to be putting beef cows or chickens on. Kind of, how are you making that work? How big are the ruts that your chicken tractors are getting pulled over? Give me a picture of kind of how you're making that work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the cows don't care.
Sure.
That they have hooves, they can walk wherever. And I've found that usually the things that care the most about a dug up pasture are the people and not so much the animals. That being said, the pigs will root a pasture the worst the first time that they go over it, because that's when all of the tasty things are in the soil that they want to go after. We now have pastures that have had pigs touch any particular spot 2 to 3 times a year. We have pastures that are now in their 3rd, 4th year of that happening, and they're barely rooted at all. Maybe one particular spot is, but that's easy enough for us to just run a pasture drag over and kind of smooth it back out. So it's really not as much a problem as it may seem once you get over the initial surge of destruction that happens the first time, the second time you run pigs over a particular spot, and then they'll start knocking those ridges back down. Right. And as long as, again, I suppose it's breeds specific and the characteristics that you select for in your breeding stock, but we don't have a big issue with wallows being rooted out in the field. And if we have one particular spot, we can just fill it back in real quick. But on pasture, we are primarily running our weaning pigs and our feeder pigs. Our sows are running in the woods. And so if they dig, a foxhole in the woods, no one cares. And they will come back to that same spot next time they come through and take a bath, in their little pond they dug out. But we found that the pastures that we have pigs on, when we run chickens over it, it is a little bit harder to move the pens because we're using the Salatin style pens. It's not as big a deal as you may think it is. And as long as you are just doing a little bit of maintenance behind that pig set when you move them, just run a pasture drag over it. Or if you've got a skid steer and there's one spot where they dug out a little hole next to the drinker, just knock that dirt back in. It's really not that much of a hassle for us to deal with.
There's a lot of things that the prevailing advice is, never do that. And then the guy who's doing it is like, it's not that big of a deal. And right. So it was good to hear the alternative view.
Yeah, well, it's easy to fall into a mental paralysis of, I can't try this because it might screw up my pastures. Right. Especially if you were in a temperate climate, a pasture can recover from whatever you do to it very quickly. And as long as you can be flexible in, the management practices that we use, that, hey, if a pasture is being excessively rooted up, start moving the pigs faster. Or if there's a particular time of year when you have the most rooting, then just make sure you don't do pigs on that pasture at that time of year. The worst for us is going to be like March, April, when it starts warming up. And so we won't do as many pigs on a particular pasture, or we'll move them very quickly so they don't have a lot of time to, excavate out a particular spot. So just adjust your management protocol to create the results that you want. And don't get locked in this mental paralysis of, I can't try this thing because I'm scared of what might happen. We'll just try it on a small scale, see what happens. Nature has a lot of forgiveness built into it when we can experiment, and prototype things at a small scale instead of, try it with 10 pigs first instead of 10,000 pigs.
Yeah, that's great. Well said. Moving on back over to chickens. You guys are processing all your own birds, chickens and turkeys. Is that right?
Yeah, all except a handful of them that we have done at a USDA facility so we can ship them out of state.
I gotcha. Okay. And is that with the PL 90 exemption?
Well, the way that Virginia does it is they have taken the PL 90 492 law and they have interpreted it to say if you are doing under 1,000 a year, basically you're under the radar. They could care less about you. If you are doing from 1,000 to 20,000, then they want to do an initial inspection of your facility. They will then issue you your exemption permit number, and then they can come in and spot check, as they feel the necessity to do so. And so we're in that second category of, we have an issued exemption from the state. They've seen our facility. They're fine with, how we do things. And I haven't seen them in probably 7 years. So, and everything's been fine in that regard.
Great. So with chickens, that's something that, a lot of pasture-based farms do sort of as their centerpiece enterprise. It's, easy to ramp up, doesn't require a lot of, I guess, expertise or equipment necessarily. So a lot of folks at least start with that, but you're obviously doing a whole lot more in terms of hog-based sales than chicken. And your beef is not a tiny enterprise, being that it's not a huge part of your farm, but also I'm assuming, it's pretty labor intensive for anybody using the Salatin pens and doing their own processing. Do you see that as being a long-term part of your farm?
Yeah, for sure. It is labor intensive, but really it's about developing systems and having efficiency built into how you operate it. It's, it's a step up on the labor front, but it's not a, huge dreaded thing that comes up during the year. We have a list of folks who work for us just on processing days, because we will do those on the weekends, and people are trying to make some extra money and so on. And so we can run 400 birds through a day and knock out. We do our sets in 800 bird increments, so we can knock out the 750 birds that made it to the finish line in a weekend, and then we're done for 3 weeks, and then everybody comes back 3 weeks later and we do it again. For us, poultry is a fairly profitable item because we've set the prices where they needed to be for us to feel good about the money we're making on it. And then we just produce to where the natural demand for that product is. And, Virginia is probably the most, quote unquote, saturated market for pastured poultry that there is, that I'm aware of, for, these small producers that are marketing locally, because this is kind of where it was born. And, everyone's trying to tap into the market. And I know, probably a dozen farms that are doing pastured poultry to some extent or another. And so, our initial idea when we started the farm was that the poultry would be a centerpiece enterprise. But, we made a decision early on that we were going to follow the market that presented itself. And if it was poultry, then we would do a lot of poultry. If it was something else, then we would follow, we would follow the vein of gold wherever it led through the bedrock. And so poultry has always been a smaller enterprise than we thought it would be, but that's fine because we are making a good margin at it and we'll produce what the market wants. And if demand goes up quite a bit, then we'll start doing more of it. But we're not going to cut our prices to the bone just to say, hey, we produced 20,000 birds last year. It makes more sense to make a profit on 4,000 birds than to break even on 20. That's kind of been our philosophy of it. But it is a good seller. The majority of our birds are sold as cut-ups, which is a great value add. That adds about another $9 per carcass to our bottom line. And probably 60% of the birds we produce are getting cut up and packaged in individual pieces.
That's great.
So yeah, I see it being something that we keep doing, as long as there's demand for it.
Sure, that's great. And do you do much wholesaling with the poultry?
Some. Again, our philosophy has been we're going to set a price that we are making money at, and try to have the market meet us there. So we're not picking up any clients that are looking for 100 whole broilers a week kind of thing. But
right.
We have some co-ops and farm stands and stores that they sell through a little bit of inventory, and we restock them as they need it. Turkeys is probably the thing that we would wholesale. You kind of have the biggest chunk go towards wholesale, but that's again the very seasonal, one-off kind of thing the week before Thanksgiving.
That makes sense. Also on your YouTube channel, which is great, you've got a really interesting and kind of, I think, fresh take with your cattle. Maybe you can just kind of talk about your approach and sort of what you're doing and what kind of results you're seeing when you're heading to the sale barn and selling to the direct market customers.
Yeah. So when you get into beef, you really are entering a different management protocol than with poultry or pigs. With chickens and pigs, if your customers want more or you have a new client come up, you can just order more feed and get more animals and expand out a little bit. But you're not really limited by space, especially with something like chicken. With grass-finished beef, you are 100% tied to the production capability of the ground that you are on. And so for us, we have 51 acres of grass that we can work with. And the basic question or situation to be worked through is what can we do to achieve the maximum amount of production from these acres? And of course, there's things you can do from a fertility standpoint and soil management and the forages that you're using. And all of those certainly will increase your carrying capacity. But you also have to look at what type of animal am I growing on this limited amount of space that I have? And how do the numbers pencil out on this? And so there's two ways basically that are used by direct to retail farms. They either have a cow-calf herd where you got your mama cows and your bulls and you're birthing calves every year and you're weaning the calves, and you have your stocker herd and your finisher herd, or maybe all of them are together in just one big gaggle. And if we were to do that on our 50 acres, we could probably finish, say 15 a year, because we'd have to maintain this mama cow herd, the bulls, and the yearling calves. The other method that's used by, I would say, the majority of direct to retail farms is a stocker / finishing operation, where they are going either to the stockyard or have connections with cow-calf farms, and they are buying in these yearling animals anywhere from 400 to 800 pounds, and they are then growing these animals out through a finishing cycle and then harvesting them. Kind of a typical length of time that they're keeping these animals is 12 to 18 months. And so, kind of looking at those two scenarios that are widely used in the direct to retail sector, are ground available for grazing being the limiting factor that we had, we asked what can we do to achieve the most production on these acres. Obviously, maintaining a cow-calf herd was not going to pencil in on the efficiency, so we're looking at some kind of just finishing operation alone. There's a principle out there developed by a guy named Bud Williams of any particular cow market will have a undervalued animal and will have a overvalued animal. And the job of a beef farm is, you always want to sell the overvalued and buy the undervalued. And looking at the commodity market the way it has been for the last 10 years that I can remember, the most undervalued animal out there is the cull cow. And so these are cows that are being weeded out of cow-calf herds either for age or a calving issue or a fertility issue, and sometimes just a straight up retirement / shutting down the operation issue. These animals are being sold into the market, but they are not really fitting what the commodity system looks for. A commodity system is built around having the same uniform product moving through the pipeline in a volume capacity. So, a feedlot wants 5,000 stocker calves that are all kind of the same, weight size, or backgrounders, or ones that can be put through a finishing cycle. They're not really looking for this older cow that is coming through the market, 5, 10, 20 at a time. And, one might have a gimp, the other one might be missing an eye or something like that. And so the market, the commodity system market, punishes that type of product, or, that kind of animal with a very low price, because no one really wants it. So it is a salvage price only, going for dog food or whatever. Looking at it though, we started doing this 4 or 5 years ago. At the sale, watching these animals come through, we're buying stocker calves and all that and paying the premium price, and these older cows are coming through at the end of the sale. Some of them clearly need to be slaughtered tomorrow, but there was a percentage of them coming through that looked perfectly fine. They, maybe were a little bit old. Some of them looked fine. They're probably just infertile. And so it started off with an experiment with 10, 15 of these type of animals that, hey, what would happen if we picked up some of these older animals and grazed them for a year? So we're going to use the same protocol as everyone is using for their stocker / finishing animals. We're not changing the production protocol, but we're changing the animal that we put into that protocol. Instead of the young growing cow, we're going to go for the older, mature cull cow. And so we got our first group back, grazed them for an entire year, learned some things along the way about what type of animal to buy and look for. And, lo and behold, these animals would put on an average gain of about 300 pounds in 1 year. Wow. Because they're being treated like a finishing animal instead of like a production cow that's being pushed hard to produce calves, and that's the only value she has. So we kind of hammered out the production protocol on it, and then coinciding with this, that worked out fantastically. Our market that we are selling to really needs about 2 to 3 more cows as ground beef and roast and stew beef for every one that's cut into steak. Because we'd have a problem selling all the T-bones and New York strip before the ground beef ran out. And so it's really helped balance out the kind of inventory demand that our market has, that we can sell 2, 3 animals as ground beef for every one that we're going to sell as steak. And so that gives us room with these old cows to, graze her for a year. Then we can look at them when we're getting ready to slaughter and say, all right, this one, she put on some weight, but there's no good steak on her. She's just going to go for ground beef. This one here fleshed out really nice. We're going to let the butcher decide what the steak looks like, and they can make the call on whether we're going to keep some of that. And, a lot of the issues or questions that people might have about this program really turned out to be non-factors with treating these cull cows, these older animals, like a finishing animal. Things like steak toughness or, flavor of the meat. There's been no issues with the quality of the product that's being produced. And I think that's because we are treating these animals like they are a finishing, stocker cow. That they're getting moved every 1 to 2 days on pasture. We're putting high value forages through them, and they are just, most of them are turning out to be butterball fat by the end.
I think maybe even in the last year or two, Dan Barber from the Blue Hill at Stone Barns, he's this famous chef who has these TED Talks and stuff. He's been the person I can think of the most who's made famous the delicacy of eating old grass-fed cows.
Was he the guy who had, was he the guy on YouTube? I'm sure that narrows it down. But yeah, I saw a video several years ago on a grilling comparison between like a grain finished, 22, 24-month-old animal, an 8-year-old one on grass. And, they were comparing the different tastes and textures of these steaks. And by far, the old grass finished cow had much more flavor and pleasurable texture to the steak than that young, aggressively fattened one.
Right. Yeah. I think it's great, and hopefully more and more people are being aware of it. I've got right now I've got hanging a 26-month-old steer and a 8-year-old cow, and I've got a butcher who buys a bunch of my chickens for his butcher shop, and he's telling me, like, as soon as you get an eye on that old mama carcass, just let me know. If she looks really good, I want half of her, because people who know that it's good meat.
Yeah, it's I think a lot more common in other countries of the world to eat older animals, and that being the preferred meat over the younger ones. Yeah, I think a typical cow in Europe is finished at like 36 to 48 months or something like that. So it's really our commodity system here in the States, in that we have, now exported to other countries that pushes the aggressive young age finish at the kind of disregard to the flavor of the actual carcass. It's all about just getting the weight, getting the marbling, and getting it on the shelf as fast as possible.
Yeah. And so when it comes to this this beef strategy, when are you buying these cull cows in? Is there a certain time that, whether for your stocking or for the market, when do you see the purchasing being ideal for you?
Typically in the fall, and that's when the majority of these animals are being culled from their herds. That's when around us there's a lot of weekend type farmers who they have a town job. They just have the cow calf herd to keep tax exemption going on the grandpa's place, and once a year they're bringing the herd in, sorting out the calves, selling them off, and whatever cows need to be culled out, that's when they hit the market. So typically November, December is when we're hitting the stockyards to buy cull cows. Although this year about half of the animals we bought are coming straight from the farm. So we've been able to develop some relationships with some local cow calf producers, and when they collect in their herd and they cut out all of the cull animals and they have them there, they just call me up and say, hey, are you interested in any of these cull cows? Because we're paying them the top end of the going price for culls. Mm-hmm. And so you can go over and look at it and say, all right, those 20 are fine, but those 2 or 3 over there, they look a little bit too far over the hill for what we can do. And that's worked out pretty well. We had a big group get dropped off a while ago, and they've settled in fine, no sickness issues or anything that is a concern coming from the stockyard. So that's where we would like to move, is working directly with the producers themselves that are around us, because it gives us an old cow that is already off to a better start coming here, because she's not been exposed to the perils of the stockyard. And we're also able to directly financially support these other farmers around us by paying a higher end price, and they're not having to take the commission hits and hauling fees and all that to get their animals to the market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's great. Thanks for going over that. I think it's a really cool thing you're doing, that you're finding an undervalued opportunity and creating a lot of value by treating that animal to a great year of a great buffet of
But and the nice thing about some old cows is they're not real anxious to run away. So
that's nice.
I've chased some stocker calves a long ways at different times, but I've never had to chase an old cow very far.
Heard that. So maybe let's switch gears to marketing talk for a little bit. One thing I'm curious about, you've got an on-farm store, which I think is really cool. It looks great. It'd definitely be a place I'd love to buy food. How far are most of your customers traveling to get to your on-farm store? And do you have an idea of what's required in terms of your location to even kind of be able to consider that?
Well, there's multiple things to consider when building an on-farm store, and what are you trying to achieve with it? Are you trying to bring the majority of your customers out to your farm, or are you using it as a center to do other things where you bring the market to your customers, but you also have a nice front for anyone who comes to the farm to see and to interact with you, as opposed to just being out behind the shed somewhere. And so, depending on your proximity to where your primary market is going to be, is really going to have a big factor in what do you want this store to do. And for us, we're out in the country a little bit. We're fairly close to the interstate, but we're in a fairly rural county. By far, the vast majority of our market is more than 20 miles away from us. And so, our farm store is kind of in that second scenario where we are using it primarily to fulfill orders that are online facilitated, whether they are being shipped to the customer, delivered directly to their home, or in a drop site, buying club model type of marketing. But we also have a very, aesthetically pleasing space for the customers who do want to come out to the farm and have that experience here and talk with us and maybe go walk around the farm and see the animals. It's only maybe 10-15% of our sales are walking through the door of the on-farm store and buying stuff here. But usually they are either some of our best customers who make an occasional trip out here, or they are the nibblers who just found us on Google or Facebook and are just stopping by to see what's going on at this place or traveling through on their vacation. So we want to present an aesthetically appealing presentation of what our farm is, having the products displayed nicely in glass freezers, because we are, what we do and what any farm that's engaged in direct to retail is doing. That first image you present of your farm, if it's with the farm store or if it's with the farmer's market setup that you have, that is imprinting the image of who you are onto those customers. And you want that to be a good impression. And that's something we worked hard to do with our farm stores, to have this clean presentation of who we are, what our product is, and also hey, we're a farm, we're out in the country, we've got sawmilled lumber, and all the lumber was milled off the farm, and build a little bit of story into what we're doing as well.
And it looks good from what I've seen on the YouTube.
Thank you.
Do you have store hours, or do you kind of have a sign that says honk your horn and we'll run down, or what does it look like?
It's a little bit of both. So we have set hours that we are open and someone is watching the store and anyone can come in. And that will adjust around. Right now it's just on Saturdays, but in the summer sometimes it'll be other days as well. Something that my wife Laura, who handles all of our marketing and order fulfillment and customer care, that is entirely her side of the operation. A program she started doing this winter is the Farm Friends program, where customers who sign up for it and basically are vetted are given the ability to come to the farm store, pretty much whenever they want to. And there is a self-checkout kiosk that it's just a square stand with an iPad in it. And, it's pretty simple that they can pull what they want out of the freezers, run through, tally it up themselves, swipe their card, and go on their merry way. So we have a little bit of both, those set hours where we'll be there, but then also for people, frankly, that we trust to be in the store with all the product unsupervised can come in and get what they want as well. And it works out well.
That's great. Aside from that, so your marketing portfolio, you've got the on-farm store, and then can you kind of break down your other marketing channels that you guys are selling stuff through?
Sure. So we have the on-farm store. We do some wholesaling to co-ops and farm stands and restaurants and some soup companies, and we will try to market anywhere that there is opportunity. Wholesale in particular grew a lot for us last year, which something kind of surprising to me in discussions at the APA conference both you and I were recently at, was most people are retreating from wholesales, but for us that was a strong growth area. So maybe there's something going on there. We do ship nationwide, and that's a small but steadily growing piece of what we do. Don't do any farmers markets. We walked away from that I think 4 years ago, and at one point we were doing 6 markets a week, and we backed that all the way back to 0 because it was the least efficient method for us to market and move the product.
That makes a lot of sense. With the wholesale piece, over the last year and a half, it's the only part of my marketing portfolio I've really grown. It's where I really see the most opportunity here in our market. We sell into the Louisville, Kentucky area.
Right.
And I'm always kind of curious as to sort of why people are giving up on it. And I kind of get it. I know that kind of like any other marketing stream or thing you try, you kind of have to reach a minimum viable threshold. And a lot of people sort of dip their toe and decide that it was not the right temperature for them.
It's a different tact that you have to use, because you are not marketing to the end consumer. You are marketing to the meat manager at the co-op or the owner of the farm stand. And so you have to have your product on point for sure. Your labeling has to be good. Your packaging has to be aesthetic. Your marketing materials have to be pleasing, but you also have to build a relationship with that person who is buying your product and then assuming the risk of reselling it to their customers. And it's a common thing I've seen for people who are getting into wholesaling is they try to dump some of their lower end product off to their wholesale customers. Yeah, and that's a quick way to get shown the door. If you sell a bunch of pork chops to a co-op and you give them all of the blade chops, and you keep the center cut and the rib cut for your own stuff, they're going to send you down the road pretty quickly. So it's
try doing that with the chef. That'll go over real good.
Yeah. It certainly is a higher volume, lower margins scenario than direct to retail, but it does have the ability to move volume. And I think it's about having the people skills to work with these folks who are also under a lot of stress in their particular role as well, to solve their problems. Instead of bringing them problems, you say, hey, how can I help you meat manager at the co-op solve your problem of moving product out of your meat case? And you have to tread carefully, of course, because you don't want to tell them how to do their job. And sure. Laura does a really good job at communicating with these guys, knowing when to push, when to back off, when to give support, and when to demand a little bit of it. So it's a very personal skills type of role to develop and maintain wholesale accounts.
No, that's absolutely right. It's still me doing the marketing, and as we've grown sales, we've had to find ways of making it more efficient. And in some ways, the wholesale is the only way to kind of efficiently move stuff. But even when you're growing 40% year over year, you can't increase the amount of time you're marketing 40% year over year.
Yeah, it's a trade-off on you're taking a lower margin, but you're moving a higher volume. And, if you've penciled your numbers correctly, you will win out at the end of the day.
Yeah. It still requires, though, a lot of time just to manage those relationships
For sure. It's very proactive. Whereas your retail customer who comes through the store occasionally, you really don't think much about. You have to reach out and maintain the relationships with those wholesale buyers, because they'll forget about you. Or they will lose their love for you when someone else comes through the door and butters them up a little bit. So it's a lot more texting those guys and talking with them and not just waiting for them to come back and buy from you next time.
Yeah, that's right. So when it comes to that marketing piece, your wife Laura is managing all or most of it. Does she have a delivery driver or anybody who's helping pack orders or run the store or anything else like that?
So we do have a role on the farm for a person to operate the store hours and do the order fulfillment side, either for the drop sites or for shipping. And right now we're in between people on that role, so she has been picking that up for the last couple months. But we do have someone that's coming back into that role in about a month. So that is a position on the farm that we have. We have I guess a little bit of a different take on the delivery person side of marketing, in that we believe the delivery person needs to be the same person that talks with those people. So if Laura is the one handling all of the drop sites and the ordering and the customer care, and same with the few restaurants and wholesale accounts that we have, she is the person making those deliveries, because that's when you actually are face to face with that person. And there's I think it is a lost opportunity when you have your marketing or salesperson be someone different than the delivery person. There are exceptions to this, of course. If you're doing a large bulk delivery to a distributor or something, then it doesn't matter. But if you are the person talking to that chef, you should be the person walking through the door and giving them their product. If you are the person talking to 100 different moms about making something in the Instapot, or this is what we're doing with the slow cooker, or all of these discussions that are had about making food, right? You should be the person handing them their box of stuff at the drop site, because you are the connection they have to the farm. And when it's a delivery person fulfilling that role, it's a lost connection between the farm and that person who is doing the marketing. We like to tie that back into the actual face and hands of the person who is meeting and giving them the product. So Laura does all of that all the way through delivery. She handles almost all of the deliveries that are done as well.
So she won't necessarily pack the orders, but she will end up actually interfacing with the customer whenever there's a face-to-face.
Yeah, as long as the order is packed correctly, no one cares who did that.
Sure.
That's not the personal connection, but it does matter who is giving it to the customer there at the end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I haven't tallied up how many hours I spend adding up total weights of chickens and marking it on the side of cases. But my butcher, if I end up buying a couple $1,000s for the cardboard from him, he will, my poultry butcher, he will put total case weights and number of pieces on the side of every single poultry box for me.
That's helpful.
And it's going to save me like probably 100+ hours this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Which all that cardboard, I needed it anyway, so I might as well buy it from him. And we're going to probably wholesale about 5,000 or 6,000 chickens this year, so it'll be
excellent,
including cut up. So it's gonna be almost necessary. Otherwise, we'll just be standing around with a calculator and a mitten all summer long.
Well, I'm sure you understand this. As a farm business grows, your time, especially as the owner element, is extremely valuable and has to be placed on the things that only you can do. Anybody can weigh up 2,000 pounds of chicken wings and write it down on boxes. But very few people can drive the vision of the farm or provide the leadership needed to keep a team moving, or, that's not a position that you're going to go hire. And the kind of adage that I've heard, which, might be a little bit direct, but it's true, is you have to let the $10 an hour people do the $10 an hour work. And, you as the owner, you got to do the things that only you can do, because no one's going to do them if you don't.
That's great. There's a version of that when I was a kid. My dad had a whole bunch of people from church help re-roof our house, and there was a professional roofer who used me as his gopher kid to go get all the supplies he needed. And he was this old guy with no teeth. And every time I'd be slow getting him his nails, he'd say, "Dollar waiting on a dime."
That's right. Yeah.
And I understood exactly what he meant, and I knew my place.
Right.
One thing I've seen is that with shipping, it seems like a lot of established farms, they've seen the whole shipping piece as the new growth sector, and maybe they're feeling some pressure from farmers markets not being what they used to be, or kind of other local avenues drying up, or the bigger players are pressing in. There's the butcher boxes and the Vital Farms and everything else that we all know, which I don't know if I should say those names in this podcast or not, but maybe I'll edit it out later. But
shots fired already.
You know who I'm talking about.
Right.
What is your take on this whole kind of new shipping thing, and where do you see it going for folks in a spot like where you and I are at?
Well, it is where the economy is going. If you look at the last 20 years, there's been this move away from brick and mortar institutions to digital. Amazon would be the biggest one, but even things like eBay and other, pretty much every company that markets online. If you look at where marketing has gone, or where it is, you can find XYZ widget anywhere. But why do you buy it from a particular company? Why do you buy a shirt from Patagonia instead of Walmart? It's still, it's a shirt. Well, someone who's buying from Patagonia, they're doing that for the brand, and they want to support what that company is all about. If you're buying, you can find half a dozen different manufacturers of cell phones, but iPhone people only buy iPhones ever. And that's because they are a believer in that brand, and they are in the tribe, in that group. And that's something that is not accidental. That's deliberate crafting by marketing departments and, people who are spending a lot of money on understanding human psychology and buying habits and why people do things the way they do. And I think the regenerative farming community is coming around to the realization that, hey, this also applies to us. Why does someone want to buy from your farm even though they live in California? Well, it's because something about the way you are crafting your brand and your message and what you're all about appeals to them, and they want to support you rather than go buy a steak at Walmart. Rather than saying, no, we don't want those sales, what a lot of farms are now doing is saying, hey, we want to be able to market and sell product to the tribe of people that are our fans, regardless of where they are. And so does the support for your farm necessarily need to be from your immediate food shed? And that really brings up a lot of the ideological discussions that are kind of being had at the core of this issue in the regenerative community, is these concepts of local and regenerative, and or local food sheds and eating within your area and all that. And everyone has an opinion on it. But companies that are looking to grow are realizing and understanding that this is where the consumer force is moving. It's moving away from brick and mortar. It's moving entirely digital. Convenience of digital, how many clicks are involved in this process of buying your product, the fewer, the better. And it's a convenience-driven economy that most people don't care about a shipping cost as long as it's built into the product. If you're going to charge them $20 for shipping, they might say no. But if you built that price into your product and you have free shipping, then they're going to say yes. And it's the Amazonification, let's say, of our economy, and farms are waking up to that reality.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. One of the folks who was talking at the APA conference we keep on referencing, who was in the talk, we were discussing shipping. One of the folks said, you're going to have to choose 2 out of 3. You got to meet people on price, convenience, or quality. And we're not going to compete with Walmart on price. We do have the quality, but we are going to have to compete on the convenience. People are going to expect that. And the convenience of having something showing up on your doorstep with the FedEx driver who already has dropped 4 other boxes off that day is hard to beat. And
and people put their time at a premium, as they should. It can be hard to take it seriously when you live in the country, and I can drive to the gas station 10 miles away in 8 minutes. You're not doing that in traffic congested Northern Virginia. A 10-mile drive is an hour expedition sometimes. Right. And so that delivery service has an absolute premium in the mind of the urban buyer, that if they don't have to go out and get it and turn it into this expedition to go find their food, if they can just have a reoccurring subscription, or they can have 1 or 2 click ordering and it's delivered to their door 2 to 3 days later, that's someone that's going to buy. And you can debate the ethics of that position all day long. And those, like I said, are the discussions that everyone is engaged in. But that is the reality of the market, and what each farm or each owner has to reconcile with themselves is where on the spectrum of, let's say ideological purity, are they going to park themselves and say, all right, we're fine with doing this, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. When it comes to your online sales, can you break it down between like bundles and buying a la carte individual meat cuts or individual items?
It's a lot of both. We've had some orders that you frankly just laugh at. It's like 1 pound of liver being shipped halfway across the country, and someone's paying $20 in delivery for 2 pounds of chicken feet, and that's they've got money to burn, so we'll give them a place to do it. But we also move a decent amount of bundles, and we've even shipped whole animals. Wow. That people apparently want to support our farm, and they believe in what we're doing, and they're willing to pay for us to ship a whole cow from here halfway across the country to where they are.
Wow. In a video on your channel, you were discussing a way of approaching decisions about value adding, and I really like the framework. It's simple. There's a logic to it. And I wonder if you could just kind of give that quick overview here. I feel like it's sort of turn on a light bulb for me. Maybe it'll benefit somebody else too.
Sure. Well, the basic principle of it is every time you assume a risk in a product's journey from conception to ingestion, you should be attaching a profit margin associated with that risk that you take. And so what that means is there should be a profit margin. We'll use pigs as an example because it's what we do. There should be a profit involved when you sell a weaned pig. And then there should be an additional profit involved when you sell the finished pig, because we've now taken the risk of raising that animal for its entire life, and 1 to 2% of them will die. So we now have the finished pig. Well, if we're going to put it into retail ready USDA packages, there should be a profit margin associated with that, and so on and so on and so on. That every time this product moves through this procession of conception to ingestion, you need to have some wickets established where you are saying we are now taking a new risk with this product, and so there should be a new profit margin associated with that. And you see the correlation of this in the pricing of products in the general market as they move through the process. You can go down to, you can hop on Craigslist, let's say, and you can buy a weaned pig probably for $30 on the cheap end right now. And it's going to be, this little runty thing that's nothing to brag about, but you could go out and find a little pig. When you go and buy a package of smoked bacon jerky that's sitting on the shelf there at the convenience store, you're paying almost $50 a pound for it. And what is the difference? Well, that animal has moved through all these stages of production, from piglet to ready to eat smoked bacon, sitting there at the convenience store, and you are far more ready and willing to pay the $50 a pound for the smoked bacon jerky, because it's sold in 2.5 ounce increments, so it's like $7 or $8. You're ready to slap that money down far more readily than you would be to go spend $30 on the whole thing all the way back at day one. And so that's kind of the principle of it that we need to remember as producers is there needs to be a system that you use with any product that you have where you say, from this point to this point, we are going to take a profit cut here. If we're going to move the product to the next stage of production or value add, that's the whole principle of value add, is it's to add more value, not to just kind of sustain the value. You should be making as a profit percentage, that should be going up each stage as this product is moving from conception to ingestion. And so that was very helpful for us in developing how we price things, that we are not taking a 2 ounce or a 1 ounce pork snack stick and treating that as an end product that, all right, here are all of our costs up to this point, and here is the profit margin we want to make on it, and this is the price that we're going to have for this product. No, that's been built on, this is the price we needed to make for the piglet, this is what we needed to make for the finished pig, this is what we needed to make for the 10-pound bags of pork trim, this is what we need to make on the snack stick at the end. And so we've got these 4 to 5 different stages where we are capturing profit from that product. And that's what makes the value added product the most profitable item you can sell, because there is this willingness in the market to carry a higher cost and ultimately a higher net margin the closer that product is to being consumed. You have no problem throwing down $10 a beer at baseball game or at the concert, but you would never in a million years pay for the barley all the way back at the beginning that made it. So it's kind of that principle. You'll pay $4 or $5 for a sausage, egg, and cheese muffin on a Saturday morning, but no one would want to go buy that piglet all the way back at the beginning, or the egg-laying hen, and produce their own sausage, egg, and cheese muffin.
Right. Or the dairy cow and her rennet and everything else. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think that's great, and I think it will hopefully help some folks as they think about how to price and even make decisions about what to produce.
Here is really the economic stability of a direct to retail, balanced type of production and sales model, is that if you have a profitable price point for any particular thing at, say, 4 to 6 different stages of production, you have nothing to fear from selling that product at any time then. We can make money selling piglets. We can make money selling 300-pound ready to slaughter finished hogs. We can make money selling a pork chop, and we can make money selling a snack stick. And so if we don't have the market for the piglets at the beginning, instead of cutting our knees off and chopping our price down to move the piglets, we are just going to move them up to the next stage. And so we'll have the finished hogs. And if there's not a market for those, we'll move it up to the next stage, and have retail ready stuff, or move it all the way through to snack sticks. And over top of this needs to be the umbrella of constantly evaluating your operation and not overrunning your headlights operationally.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's not ever getting caught in a scenario where you have to sell your product at a loss because you only have one place to sell it and one time and one price. And that is the most damaging thing to farmers in the commodity system, is it only puts a value on the product at one position in the production chain at one time for one price. And there's no other option available to the farmer. And at the core of what I think we need to be doing as a direct to retail movement, and I think this would encompass kind of everybody who's under the umbrella, whether you're certified organic or not, or what type of soil practices you're using or whatever. We are saying we're not going to produce a product for one sale at one point for one price. We are going to try to capture value at any stage for this product by controlling the access to the retail market.
That's great. And that's really what our unfair advantage is that we have all that optionality, and we have the market and the production, and we're not beholden to a big entity out there.
Yeah, we're saying no to the commodity system that's been built over the last 150 years that has taken, all of the power away from the actual farmers today. They control, if you look at commodity dairy, commodity pork, commodity poultry, they have the actual farmer on the ground has zero control over the price they are paid for their product.
Yeah. We had one intern here our first year when we were on our current property, and her dad is a big grain and hog farmer from northern Indiana, and his daughter wanted to get into direct market farming, and he came down to visit and check out what we were doing, and we were a lot smaller back then than we are now, but he was just like, "So how are you making a living at this?" He was just concerned for his daughter. He wasn't being antagonistic or anything. And I just kind of said, "Well, we don't do the processing, but we do all the transportation. We do all the the decision making. We do all the retailing, and we do all the wholesaling. We're taking up all those dollars that everybody gets out of the $5 sale."
Well, if you look at where like the poultry industry right now is, if you are raising broiler chickens for any of the big producers, that farmer who's actually growing those birds is making 9 cents a bird.
Yeah.
And yes, he has to do 1 million of them a year to even try to come anywhere close to breaking even or making a little bit of money. So, it does turn into this big volume game. And, that's where this direct to retail movement is saying, hey, we're done playing those games. Yeah.
It's a great time to be alive. I know that the game we're playing was a harder one to get into and make work a generation ago. And, I'm hopeful we can continue pushing the needle to where we can make farming in a way that's better for our families and our communities and our land to be actually sustainable and viable even more into the future. So, first of all, thanks. Just wrapping it up, I'd like you to be able to kind of have a chance to tell folks where they can learn more about you. I mean, I know you've got your YouTube channel. People might want to buy some piglets from you, or I know you've also got some farmer training things out there too.
Yeah, well, the farm is J&L Green Farm. So it's me, Jordan, my wife, Laura, and our last name is Green. So a real original name there. But that's our farm name, J&L Green Farm. You can find us online. If you're in the local area, certainly come on out to the farm and you can see what we're doing. Check out the farm store, but we also do ship everywhere that FedEx will ship. And so that's an option as well. Really the more educational and advocacy side I do through a different entity called Farm Builder, and that's really oriented towards showing how we have developed these pasture-based production models at scale. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of content out there at the homesteader level or the small farm level, but there's not a lot really showing how this is done on scaled applications where, hey, this is a farm that's paying multiple full-time incomes a year. We're doing a lot in sales, and here is how we raise 100 pigs at a time, or, here's how we do 500 turkeys at a time. So there's been a lot of good reception to that. So that's, you can find Farm Builder on pretty much any of the socials out there and on YouTube. And, we do some on-farm classes a couple times a year, specifically for the farrow to finish side of pigs, because that's kind of, I feel is our niche, and that's what I'm passionate about. We do have a couple other things on the horizon for this year. This coming fall, so it'd be fall of 2020. We're going to have a farm leadership summit. I think we're going to do that here in Virginia, and it's going to be discussing a lot of leadership and training type things, which I think are real critical for the next steps that need to be taken by, let's say this movement it's growing beyond just, a guy and the wife or guy and his, friend doing this on a farm. It's building these teams that are going to help grow the operation and expand, the vision. And that seems to be a great need out there is, what do you do to actually hire people? What is even the process of hiring people? How do you change your mindset as an owner from being the frontline trooper every day to now you are the leader of men and women, not the leader of the chickens? And, they require a different skill set to lead than the chickens. And so that's something that we're developing right now, and we'll have some dates for it coming out in the next month or so. And so that's stuff that we're real excited about doing.
That's really exciting. I mean, I sometimes reflect back on the things that I never thought I would have to learn how to do at a passable or better quality when I started farming. Things like, marketing and manipulating spreadsheets and forecasting and
managing your cash flow.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a big one. And these are things that nobody said on the on the brochure about getting into farming. Nobody said you need
Right.
these skills. You're going to have to develop them before you have any success. And yeah, I see, as someone who's maybe kind of right at where you're talking about, I do see that's like a really important thing. Managing the humans, when I'm so used to working by myself as a one-man show, is becoming something I recognize more and more need for skilling up in. And
it's a universal problem with every farmer I have talked to in this space is, how do you find a team? How do you lead them? How do you retain them? Turnover is a big issue. And so that's something that I'm really hoping this will offer a lot of tools for, is just, hey, these are kind of the fundamentals of leading people. These are just some basics that you need to address when you're hiring folks and, things like that.
That's great. Well, your pitch was appealing to me. There's some market feedback for you right there.
Awesome.
That's like a really good thing. Cool. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that most folks probably are familiar with you some, but I hope that they got to hear you sharing some really great perspectives on some questions that maybe they don't get to hear you talk on as much. And it's been great chatting with you, and I hope we get to hang out again sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and looking forward to your podcast launching.
Thanks.
And there it is, episode 3. Really want to thank Jordan for coming on and chatting with me. He's somebody who has a thriving YouTube channel and plenty of opportunities to be heard in his own spaces, and I appreciate him coming on my podcast before I had ever even dropped an episode. He's a kind man and somebody who has a lot to offer and is really sharing some high-level business and farming knowledge, and I appreciate that he was able to offer us his time. If you don't already subscribe to his YouTube channel, check it out. Farm Builder is the name of it, and it's just pure gold all throughout. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any desire to check out more about myself and what we have going on, I'm on Instagram at Gross Family Farm. That's GROCE Family Farm. You can email me, info@grossfamilyfarm.com. Website, Facebook, it's all out there. Thanks again, guys, and have a great week. We'll talk to you next week with another new episode.